drowning 22,000 innocent lives in black vomit and mud just to satisfy the unchecked ego of a national hero. This is the exact catastrophic multi-billion-dollar engineering execution that permanently slaughtered an entire generation of workers, shattered the reputation of a global genius, and completely bankrupted half of the French nation in a single dark decade. Ferdinand de Lesseps was universally worshipped as the untouchable savior of global trade after successfully carving the historic Suez Canal through the flat, motionless and bone-dry sands of Egypt in 1869. Yet his supreme, unyielding arrogance fell straight into history's most vicious, terrifying and unforgiving geographic blind spot. A series of highly calculated, profoundly stubborn executive decisions that blindly guided an entire empire of wealthy investors straight into a horrific, disease-ridden green cemetery. If this deep dive makes you rethink how catastrophic failure really happens, hit that subscribe button right now and stay with us. Join our Wisdom Traps community as we dissect the calculated human errors and fatal decisions that broke history's greatest minds. New episodes drop weekly. Now, look closely at this brutal reality and ask yourself the ultimate question. How could the world's most celebrated engineering mastermind be so completely blinded by his past glory that he chose to wage an open suicidal war against the brutal, unchanging physical laws of nature? Here is the raw, uncovered truth that history books usually hide. The French didn't fail at the rugged Isthmus of Panama because they ran out of money or lacked advanced Western machinery. They mathematically engineered their own economic execution. Driven by pure, unadulterated hubris and backed by millions of frantic French citizens who handed him their hard-earned life savings, Lesseps stubbornly insisted on building a flat, sea-level canal, exactly like he did in Egypt. He arrogantly refused to build complex locks to control the massive water levels, blindly believing that the towering mud mountains of Central America would simply bow down and obey his royal commands. But the tropical environment of Panama was completely savage, unpredictable, and fiercely hostile. The moment the relentless, heavy tropical rains struck the excavation sites at the infamous Culebra Cut, the entire mountain landscape dissolved into liquid chaos. Massive, terrifying mudslides instantly swallowed his expensive steam shovels, buried his heavy iron infrastructure alive, and completely wiped out months of brutal human labor in a single afternoon. The mountain lines simply collapsed right back into the trenches as fast as the men could dig them out. The engineering reports were deliberately falsified to maintain the beautiful illusion of progress. Lesseps stood on the muddy banks looking at the catastrophic destruction and proudly declared to the newspapers that everything was going perfectly according to plan. This rigid, narrow mindset locked the entire operation into a fatal death spiral. The French technical team kept pouring millions of francs in specialized machinery that was completely useless against the sticky, heavy clay of the Panamanian jungle. The massive steam engines sank directly into the swampy terrain, becoming rusted monuments of human vanity. Laborers from the West Indies were imported by the thousands to replace the workers who fled the project in terror. They were forced to work 12-hour shifts under a burning, suffocating sun, hacking away at the unpredictable rock formations with primitive hand tools because the heavy machinery was constantly trapped in the mud. The global investors back in Paris had absolutely zero idea that their life savings were being systematically ground into the wet earth. They were totally blinded by the grand marketing campaigns orchestrated by Lesseps, who used his status as a national hero to borrow more cash from innocent middle-class families. The atmospheric tension inside the jungle camps was thick with paranoia and despair. The air was heavy with the smell of rotting vegetation and stagnant water. Every single morning, the supervisors would walk through the tents to count how many laborers had survived the night. The infrastructure was completely collapsing under the weight of nature's wrath, but the executive board in France stubbornly refused to question their original flawed assumptions. They believed that human will and French engineering could overcome any geographical obstacle on Earth. It was a complete psychological entrapment. Then the real invisible executioners arrived to turn the project into an absolute living nightmare. Stagnant, muddy waters inside the massive trenches became the perfect breeding grounds for trillions of deadly infected mosquitoes. Yellow fever and malaria exploded across the workers' camps with absolute unmitigated brutality. Brilliant French engineers and desperate West Indian laborers were dropping dead right on top of their construction blueprints. In a dark twist of medical ignorance, French doctors actually placed pans of water under hospital bedposts to keep crawling ants away, accidentally creating the ultimate automated breeding pools for the very mosquitoes that were slaughtering their patients. The symptoms were horrific. Their skin turned a sickly dark yellow color, their organs collapsed, and black vomit filled the overflowing, panicked field hospitals. The entire geographical project became a literal meat grinder, consuming over 22,000 human lives under the boiling jungle sun. Back in Paris, Lesseps went into total arrogant denial. He desperately hid the horrific death tolls from the public, cooked the financial books, and burned through fortunes in massive bribes to buy off the French press and corrupt politicians. He begged for more cash from innocent middle-class families, spinning a beautiful illusion of progress until his entire empire completely collapsed in 1889. Triggering the infamous Panama scandals. It was the largest financial crash of the 19th century, causing complete humiliating bankruptcy and leaving hundreds of thousands of French middle-class families financially ruined for generations. All because a stubborn, untouchable leader refused to question his own outdated assumptions and foolishly applied a desert blueprint to a tropical jungle. The tragic collapse of the French Panama Canal proves that your absolute greatest past victories can easily become your ultimate psychological trap, turning your supreme confidence into permanent blindness. But history's most shocking self-destruction didn't happen in the mud of Central America. Wait until you see the desperate nation that launched a massive military campaign against a tiny, harmless bird, only to accidentally trigger the deadliest, most horrific famine in human history. Think about